In this week's video, we will be taking a look at 3 different but equally wonderful homes as they would have been between 1900 and 1920. Hello and a big welcome to Through Lucy's Lens, weekly videos where I go somewhere interesting and hopefully you will find them interesting too. I'm a social historian from England, so I'm interested in people more than politics. So let me be your guide through time. In this week's video, I'm at the Ulster Folk Museum near Belfast, and this was another must-visit museum for me. And this week we'll be taking a tour of 3 of the homes here that I fell in love with for different reasons. So please be sure to tell me which was your favourite house in the comments and why, because as you know, I love to read them. The first house I want to show you is Cluan Place Dressmakers House, carefully relocated from East Belfast in 1987. This row of terraced housing was originally built in 1889 by a local builder and Justice of the Peace, Walter Carruth. This 2-storey terraced house housed his family for nearly 100 years. So who lived here? Well, in 1901, Walter lived here. He was nearly 60 at this time, with his wife Margaret, who was 53, their teenage son, who was a carpenter, and their school-age daughter. There was also a lady here called Elizabeth McCashin, who was 65, and she was a dressmaker, giving this house its name. By 1911, their daughter Mary lived here with her husband Robert, he was a builder, and their 9 children. And Elizabeth is still here making dresses. A lodger is also recorded here, suggesting that this house was bustling and very, very full. Daily life here revolved around necessity and enterprise. The back room served as Elizabeth's dressmaking studio, while in front of it family life continued with meals, chores, children, lodgers in and out. The Singer sewing machine remained here until Mary's last years. And of course, coal fired the kitchen range, chamber pots were emptied through the house, and sanitation improvements didn't come here until the 1900s when gas lighting came to the area after 1905. One of Mary's daughters recalled the sound of the sewing machine buzzing and the smells of mothballs and waxed floorboards. Another person remembered Elizabeth quietly instructing local girls in dressmaking in the parlour on Saturday mornings. Despite the sectarian tensions in this part of the north of Ireland, Cluan Place remained a close-knit Protestant community, tied to the nearby shipyards and mills. If you haven't seen my video about the Titanic workers' cottage yet, this home is also in that area of Belfast today. This house stood throughout major events, the shipbuilding boom, 2 world wars, and of course the Troubles. After redevelopment and clearance, the Carruth McCowan family left in 1987, and the building was moved brick by brick here to the Ulster Folk Museum. It's furnished to reflect life around 1910, and it preserves the working class household items, so the coal scuttle, oil lamps, and of course the precious Singer sewing machine. I felt this house had real character, and it was a real time capsule. In fact, all the houses at this museum are so beautifully curated that there was some footage where you can actually hear me gasp as I entered the rooms, because you're seeing these rooms for the first time at the same time as me. Now, as always, take some time to relax and look around. I'll stop talking for you to have a look around this house. The next house is one of 6 Tailane Labourers Cottages. Those of you who have watched my videos before will know that I'm drawn to the homes of the poorest, and this tiny little cottage stole my heart. The row of houses was brought to the museum in 1976 from Rowland Street and was once called Tailane in Belfast. The terrace dates from the late 1820s and was built with local brick to house local unskilled labourers. In 1906, the census records show the residents here included labourers like Richard Bateman, Henry Beggs, Robert O'Hara, and also there was a plumber living in one of these cottages called John Moffat. These houses are tiny, and I was stood here wondering where any furniture would have gone if you could afford it, let alone the large families who lived cheek by jowl in these homes. The house measures around 12 feet by 15 feet per room, and it only has 8-foot ceilings, so it all feels a little bit like it's coming in on you. The house has interior shutters, no actual back door, and residents emptied their chamber pots through the living room into the rear yard where there was a shared cesspit. Sanitation improved slightly when mains water arrived here in the 1880s. And also there were free fittings of gas meters between 1905 and 1912, of which you can still see the original gas meter. This makes up for the modern day fire extinguishers, folks, that you see dotted around. There's no need to point these out because they annoy the heck out of me too, but better be safe than sorry, for these buildings are so important. Anyway, before the gas, food would have been cooked over an open peat fire in the front parlour, and probably due to the price of gas, probably after the installation of a gas mains too. Residents in these homes had large families and worked long days in nearby linen mills, brick fields and the docks. Children often helped bring the bricks home, while the women collected water, cooked, cleaned, washed and maintained the basic sanitary standards that they could. They really did do their best. There was a church at nearby Sandy Row that provided schooling and outreach care to the children in these houses. The central house in this terrace has a passage, and that allows a donkey or a small animal and cart to access the yard, which was likely used for carrying coal or goods. Despite the harsh conditions here, the neighbours supported each other. They shared their washing water, watched each other's children, shared food, and helped each other out. During the 1847 typhus and cholera outbreak, a Dr. Brown described Tailane as cesspools, poisoning the air. Yet the families here survived, they endured, and they continued to live here. The houses remained lived in into the mid-20th century, although many were demolished in urban clearances. These cottages here are 6 rare survivors, and of course remind us of Belfast's earliest examples of working class houses that were built here due to the rapid industrialisation during the Industrial Revolution. So, again, I'm going to let you sit back, relax, and take a look around the rest of this house. The next house we see is the Northern Banking Company's Port Glenone branch. Now, I've probably said that wrong. You could tell me that I've said it wrong. That's absolutely okay. But this was the manager's residence, and it was replicated here at the museum and opened in 1991. This building is based on original plans from Main Street, Port Glenone, drawn up in 1910. The original house was completed in 1920 due to a delay from World War I. The original building is still there and lived in today, so this one is a replica. And this house was an unexpected joy. I cannot express to you how much I loved this home. It took me by surprise, and as a lover of the 1920s, the decor took my breath away. There was also a lovely feeling in this house, happy, light, and airy, and I couldn't wait to show you it. So who was lucky enough to live here in 1920? Well, it was home to Thomas Edwin James and his family. He was the first manager of this bank who was appointed in 1920. And he lived here with his wife Mary, 3 young children, and they had a governess and a cook who lived on site too. Censuses also showed that there were staff around, a cashier called Mr. Barry, a ledger clerk, a junior clerk, and other people who worked in the bank. Life in this house, of course, contrasted really sharply with that at Tailane. This family had indoor toilets, indoor bathrooms, separate rooms, separate bedrooms, and of course luxuries unimaginable to those in Tailane, such as decorated carpets and modern appliances in the kitchen, like an early example of a gas cooker. Mary James hosted afternoon teas here and Sunday receptions, with local dignitaries attending. This family had status in the community in this area. Thomas lived above the bank to maintain security, and you can see that there are bars on the downstairs windows. Stories passed down recount how Thomas once foiled a would-be robber chasing off the suspect into the night, and this earned him local admiration. This branch of the bank closed in the mid-20th century as branches consolidated, but the James family remained in the area and active within local civic circles. Mary taught Sunday school until retirement, and Thomas served on the town council. Descendants of the family recall the family piano and how the governess had her own quarters, and also how Thomas briefly kept a pet terrier dog in the yard. This building stands as middle-class domestic heaven, doesn't it? It's a symbol of the early 20th century life that was aspired to. And it's not something that I've shown on the channel before, because honestly, it's rare to find. We see examples of housing lived in by the poorest and the richest, but this house sits somewhere in the middle, an aspirational example of living standards that I think we still aspire to today. This house was absolutely wonderful to see, and as a lover of the home decor of the 1920s, this one stood out for me. How I would have loved to have sat on the sofa listening to the gramophone, and with that in mind, take a relaxing look around the rest of the house. Now finally, as a little Lucy bonus, is the Guilford Picture House. The Picture House was relocated here in 1996 from Guilford, County Down. It was built in the 1850s as a hay store, but it was converted into a silent cinema just on the cusp of World War I, and it remained active until 1931. A family called the Pentlans ran the cinema. His wife Ida provided live piano accompaniments during the films. Local helpers would sell tea and buns in the foyer, collect fees and sometimes read subtitles aloud for locals with poor sight or literacy. One story recalls George sneaking film reels past the curfew during World War I to continue weekend screenings to build the morale of the local village. This place was an escape for the villagers, for the mill workers and the people who lived in this area. There was no heating here, so it would have been cold, but they did provide stoneware hot water bottles that you could rent if you were freezing. What I really loved here is the community involvement. Parents brought their children. It was a local hub. They also had local comedians occasionally and live introductions of newsreels. For villagers, this place was entertainment and a place to socialise. You could choose from the cheaper benches or pay a bit more to rest your back against a wooden bench. Those with the most money may be treated to private entry through the side door to avoid the rabble and be ushered into the parlour for tea and cake. This picture house closed in about 1931 after the 1929 Torquay Revolution. They were unable to finance sound equipment, so it just had to close down. But it remained untouched for decades, so lucky us. Today it's part of the museum and they occasionally still host silent film events here. And I just think it preserves the atmosphere of what a small town leisure place would have been like during the 1920s or cinema's golden era. Honestly, I couldn't wait to share it with you. As always, thank you for watching. Your support is so appreciated. I really hope you enjoyed the 3 homes that I showed you today, and there's a lot more to show you from this museum and it will be coming soon. If you don't already subscribe to the channel, it really does help me. I'm determined to keep on bringing new content to you, and your support helps me go further, see more, spend more time researching and give you more valuable information. So, that's my promise to you, and my other promise is that all my content will always be free. Thank you for your support. So until next week, tell me your favourite house. It's a tough one for me, but I probably liked the Tailane Labourers Cottage most. What can I say? I'm a sucker for the grimy life. However, if someone offered me a key for the rooms above the bank, I don't think I'd say no. But every house I've shown you shows a story of everyday life, class and work in the early 20th century. And actually, I love them all. So until next time, thank you for your support and see you soon. Goodbye.